Welcome to the 64 Squares studio, where chess history comes to life, one classical battle at the time. Hello everyone, hope you're having a wonderful day. And today we are starting a new series of all the games that Bobby Fischer, 11th world champion, has ever played. And my motivation to start this series is well, first of all, it's Bobby Fischer, the greatest player of all time. And secondly, I want to decipher how Bobby Fischer became so powerful and what triggered him that, he was pretty strong tactically, everyone is, but what made him so powerful? So, hopefully, we will be able to decipher how Bobby Fischer becomes so powerful in chess, and we are starting from his early days. It's the game I got is the 1955 Albert.H versus Robert James Fischer, and Fischer born in 1943, so he's around 12 years of age, and his US rating is around 1850. So let's see how 1850 Robert James Fischer played. Fischer is black and Albert is white. So Albert played d4 and we have the King's Indian defense. Fischer was throughout his entire career, King's Indian defense was his one of the main weapons against d4. And we can see from his early days that he was still enjoying the King's Indian to his most. Okay, h3. I personally really like this move h3 because it just stops bishop g4 idea, and it's just a waiting move to see what will black play, either c5 or e5. I personally would select c5 over e5 because of the following idea. Knight d7 was played by Fischer. And bishop to e3 simply developing, and after e5 we have d5. Of course, you'd want to close the center. And a5 by Fischer. Well, you can play knight to c5 directly, but after, let's say, knight to d2, you still have to play a5 to stop pawn to b4. It's probably going to transpose. So a5 first, bishop to e2, and b6, which is a very dubious move. It has been played a lot of time, but not on the highest level. There is a problem with b6. If you want to, know about your structure, patterns, and pawn breaks, then try to pause the video and try to find what b6 weakens and how white can take advantage of this while I give you a couple of seconds. Okay, so well, first of all, it weakens the c6 square, and secondly, you notice that with the pawn on b6 you cannot play c6 anymore as a break. So your only pawn break is pawn to f5 in the future. So, and that will open your king. So here white can play a very interesting move, pawn to g4. Idea being, if let's say you play this and I just defend the e4 pawn, I will play f3, I will play h4, I will play queen c2. I can leave my king in the center. I can long castle also. And without this pawn to c6 break, my king side, my queen side is very secured. You don't have any pawn breaks to open up the position. And if you compare this position with knight to c5 directly, and let's say we go into the same position with, okay, let's say bishop d7, g4. Now black can play c6, and this is huge difference because now black may prepare b5 with rook b8, or just open the c file for the rook, and black has the counterplay. So that's the pawn structure theory. I mean, if you play b6, you don't have c6. Okay, but Fischer's opponent Albert just castled kingside. So if you have if you play d4, then something to keep in mind. Okay, Fischer played knight to e8, a very standard idea. f5 next, queen to c2, and knight to c5. First of all, just putting the knight there because if you had played f5 directly, then knight g5 I think looks menacing because knight e6 will come with an attack on the queen. Okay, queen c2, knight c5, and we have knight to h2, which is, and it was in this position that this move has been never repeated again, and also this was a novelty at that time. I mean, you definitely want the knight on d2 if you want to free up the f pawn, and this knight is it's well placed because you want to, play for c5 and the knight gets the c4 square. While on the knight on h2, I don't know what's the purpose on knight on h2. But okay, now I think black is already quite better with pawn to f5, and I would prefer black any day in this position now. f3 and f4, of course. And after bishop to f2, if you are a King's Indian player as black, then pause the video and try to find what is the very standard maneuvering this position which Bobby Fischer missed when he was 1850. While I give you a couple of seconds. Okay, so you see, all of your pawns are on the dark squares. So your dark bishop is kind of bad bishop, while all white pawns are on the light squares. So white's light bishop is a pretty bad piece. So what you want is you want to keep your light bishop here, and you want to get rid of black bishop, and you want to white to have this bishop, bad bishop, and you want to get rid of this dark bishop because it is also defending the dark squares. So if you combine all these positional idea, bishop f6 becomes a very strong possibility. With the simple idea of bishop h4 next move, you cannot stop it. And after the exchange of dark bishop, black's attack is just free flowing because of this particular pawn structure and all the dark square weaknesses, which will be a huge factor after the dark bishop is exchanged off. Okay, but Fischer actually played queen to g5. I myself would have drawn to this move at least for a few seconds because it directly threatens bishop into h3 first of all. So that's a threat. So you have to play king to h1. And okay, I mean, you can play knight to f6 right now, but Fischer decided to play bishop to d7, just actually developing. Maybe hinting to stop knight b5 because now he will just capture it. Rook to g1 is a very dubious move. I would definitely have played rook to b1 with the idea of, b3, a3 and b4. And one thing to notice that bishop to d7 prevents white from playing a3 because now pawn to a4 is possibility. Of course, you don't want to exchange of your bishop. And even though you can, the bishop defends the pawn. So, and there is no pawn break anymore. With this knight on d2, you have b3. With this knight on h2, well, no more. So nice move, bishop to d7, a prophylaxis. Rook to g1 by white. I mean, it definitely prepares pawn to g4, but pawn to g4 is such an ugly move. And Fischer just allows it because it is a bad move. Why would you stop it? And g4 by white, which is definitely a mistake. Black's attack is very strong, so you definitely has to prepare to have a counter attack ready. Now pawn to b3 again with the idea of pawn to a3 and pawn to b4 is called for, but pawn to g4 by white and simply and passant by Fischer. F takes g3, and after rook takes g3, queen h6, and suddenly you cannot defend this h3 pawn. Because if you play king to h2, there is knight h5, which just traps the rook. And with that, Fischer position is just winning with 18 moves. Knight to d1 by white. I don't know what it does. Maybe knight e3, maybe bishop e3. Knight to h5 by Fischer. Pretty good move. Knight to g1, rook to g1, and the pawn on h3 falls. Now Fischer is a pawn up. He has a safe king. He has a weakness on f3. He has great bishop, he has a great attack, he has great minor pieces, and he just have to convert. So bishop to e3, knight to f4 of course, knight to f2 attacking the bishop, and bishop to f6. You could have played bishop d7, but bishop f6 is solid enough because that bishop is not doing anything anyways. Rook g3 attacking the bishop, bishop d7, and knight to g4 with the attack on the queen and the bishop, but you never gonna take the bishop. So bishop takes g4, rook takes g4 because knight is pinned, queen g7, freeing up the h pawn. So maybe h5 g5 comes in next. In such positions, I personally would love to play king to f7 to just get the king to d7 or maybe even b7 and then just open up the king side. So that's one idea. I mean, that's a very common idea in King's Indian actually. Rook a to g1. Okay, I mean, it's just biting the grenade because there is a pawn on s7. G6 is never gonna be a target. Bishop to e7, just opening the f file. Very useful move. Queen to d2. Okay, now white is actually attacking the knight 3 times, so you definitely have to defend it, or so as Albert thought. But Fischer defended it with a tactics with rook to f7. Goes on to show just how powerful Fischer was. This rook f7 move. Because now if you try to win a pawn, then now the rook into f8 does not come with a check. Queen to h6 wins because it just is a pain. You cannot defend the rook. So you cannot do that. So white played rook 1 to g3. I don't know what's the purpose of this move, but okay. Fischer played rook a to f8. Very much a well, it's a natural move. Again, I would have considered king f8, king e8 in a right moment, but okay. Bishop f4, rook f4, and rook to h3. Okay, now white is trying to mobilize his pieces in some type of banco position or some type of compensation, but there is no compensation. And after queen to f7, it is very apparent that white's pieces cannot really defend this pawn. I mean, this bishop is horrible. White bishop is black's bishop is horrible as well, but black bishop has potential, as you will see. Rook to g3, and here I would definitely play rook to h4, just exchange of one pair of rooks and then infiltrate with queen to f4, and black is completely winning. But Fischer played bishop to h4, which is also a good move. And after rook g4, bishop to f2, I really like this idea because now the bishop gets to d4 and gets to this beautiful diagonal. But something strange happened here. I mean, Fischer is just 12 years old, so I don't know how strong Fischer was. But after bishop to d1, it was in this position that Albert and Robert James Fischer was agreed to a draw. Even though black is -3, I mean, black is pawn up, black has active pieces, has better bishop, better knight, well coordinated target on f3 square, and you can just shuffle your king to the queen side and just start pushing the pawns. But well, you will see this pattern again and again and again. Fischer at the younger age was not that strong, or rather was not that eager to win every single game. You will see this quite often. But yeah, so that's the start of the series, and that's the first game. I hope you enjoy this one. And if you did, then well, you can subscribe to the channel, and I will see you on the next video. Bye.